Okay, so thanks everyone for joining. Um, I don't think we have anything specific on the agenda today, but please correct me if I'm wrong. If we don't have anything on the agenda, I thought maybe we could spend just a little bit of time reviewing some recent feature requests from users, just so that everybody is aware of them. And yeah, that will be the meeting, I think. So let me know if there's anything else you want to discuss. Otherwise, I'm going to share my screen and we can take a look at those feature requests. All right, so I will share my screen now. And those are the ones that we have tagged. Those are the issues we have tagged with the reported by end user tag. It's possible that some of them have not been labeled properly. So if you're aware of another issue, please just add the label and let us know now so we can take a look at it. I'm gonna skip the one at the bottom here, 5252, because it's pretty old one that's been discussed as part of the GitHub issue. The next one, I think that we already have a PR and Ongleng was working on it. So I'm gonna start with this one. This one was kind of like sorry, yeah. This one was a request to add like a new mode for like SNAT operations that we do as part of Antrea. So either like regular node SNAT when SNAT is performed by the node for the local pods trying to access the internet, and for egress SNAT when SNAT is performed at the egress nodes for pod workloads. And the mode that's proposed is to add like a support to use the random fully flags in IP tables, which changes the way that the source port is selected when doing source NAT. So by default, if I'm not mistaken, Linux will try to preserve the source port when doing SNAT of the original connection. That's usually a desired behavior for a firewall to do things like firewall punching and traversal. So that's why it's a default behavior. But IB tables also support a separate mode, which is a random fully mode. And when that mode is used, the source port is randomized. And so the user asked for that feature because they thought it would be a good way to reduce in their specific case um, um, source port reuse that they were observing in their cluster. So their Kubernetes nodes were sitting behind like a firewall network device, and the device was reporting a lot of like warnings because of the same source TCP port being reused by different connections within a short amount of time, which in this case I think was a legitimate behavior, but they were not like super happy about that. And so they thought that being able to have that flag would help with their issue because the source port would be randomized. In their case, the application was kind of like had a tendency to reuse apparently the same source port for successive connections. And it seems that I don't know if it's still the case in the latest version of the code, but I've seen I think a similar flag in Cilium to control whether random fully is used in IP tables for SNAT. So I thought this was a pretty simple thing to add, with kind of like the only open question being whether we should have like a global flag that's applicable to all the SNAT operations in Antrea, or whether we should have like individual flags for node SNAT and egress SNAT, for example.
For egress SNAT, do you mean a global option for all egresses or a parameter for each egress object?
I thought for all egress would be sufficient, so something in the Antrea config map, but I don't think strongly about it. Sorry, I don't have a strong feeling about it either way.
Okay.
My personal preference was to have like one global flag for all the SNAT operations that we do, and then the user kind of like had a preference for a separate one for node SNAT and egress SNAT. But that didn't really give me like a strong reason for why they would prefer that.
Sorry, your preference is a single one or two global ones?
My preference was a single global one, but the
Okay,
user prefers two global ones for the two different types of SNAT, and I'm okay with that solution as well. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I think we could start with a simple one and see if that's really uh, further requirement to make the configuration different for each egress or for node SNet and egress SNet. Yeah. This is also the first user request about the SNet port. Yeah, but I remember we had also encountered these problems for other users, right? It also suspected that the reuse of the source port causing some DFW or some firewalls to behave in a weird way.
Yeah, I agree that can be a good solution to avoid some issues, even though I think in a lot of cases the issue is either with the application making some is usually with sometimes it's with application behavior at least, but yeah, I don't think it can hurt to add this flag.
Yeah,
According to the Cilium issue here, it can they suggested introducing it to avoid some race conditions. Uh, and that was back in 2020, so I don't know if the same rationale still applies. Yeah.
I also remember the Kubernetes net rule for node the node level net rule installed by Kubernetes itself. You has set random fully. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
think
does. Yeah,
it.
I checked the other day as well. Yeah, good point. Okay, so I think we can consider this. I'm gonna mark it as accepted. I think we have a triage. No, I thought we had accepted or something like this, but oh no, we have something for uh, oh life cycle. I don't. Uh, Oh, we have active. Okay. No, but yeah, we can comment. I think this is also like a good issue for a new contributor potentially. It's not very difficult, especially if we go with like the global flags approach. So maybe I'll add this tag. Let's see. Okay, this one Chan has a PR already. It was a bug, not it's a bug, not a user feature request. This one is new from today. And it's good to see that someone is using the BGP feature, BGP support that we added in Antrea 2.1 already. So that's good to hear. They have a request to support a BGP confederation in Antrea, which is not something I'm very familiar with, but apparently it's specific to the internal BGP use case, and it's kind of like avoid the burden of having a full mesh between all your routers, IBGP routers in your routing domain. So it's a way to partition your private autonomous system and kind of like avoid building that full mesh of routers. So I'm not very familiar with the use case, but what's nice is that the user provided a lot of like kind of like details about their specific network topology and what they want to do. They also I suggested that they provide like a sample of what they would like the BGP policy API to look like with configuration support, so we can take a look at that. And they have a link to the Go BGP um, documentation on BGP configuration. So my take is that We can look at this in more details, but my take is that it would be quite straightforward to implement because it's really just like a pass-through configuration between the BGP policy API and the Go BGP configuration. Um, and we don't really have much to do on our side, and it doesn't impact our current API design because it's only an additional field and not a modification of existing fields. My only concern was about testing because in our end-to-end test, we cannot really simulate such a complicated topology easily. So maybe we can do some like simpler testing with BGP confederation, but I think by nature it's meant for like more complex routing topologies. But maybe we'll find a way. So yeah, it provided a lot of details. So I don't know if anyone has any insights on this. That's a pretty advanced BGP feature. So probably most people are not super familiar with that on the call.
I think Anthony, it is like route reflector, like one designated router which will advertise to all the other peers, which is outside of AS domain. It's like that, I think. And the new terminology is like configuration, I think, because I see the route reflector, BGP route reflector here
I
in
think it's
diagram.
a
Yeah,
it's a it's a level above that. So it's a similar end goal, I think, of reducing the connections between BGP routers and the amount of information that has to be exchanged. But I think it's one level above that. So it's in this case they use BGP route reflectors plus confederation. So I think those are two different things, but with similar objectives.
I see.
Because today I think you can use route reflectors with our current BGP support in Antrea without any specific change on the Antrea side. At least that's what I think. But this requires some changes in the way we configure Go BGP on each node. All right, so I also think this is a good issue. Obviously, this is a real use case for that user, something they care about. So I don't know if we'll be able to prioritize this, but it's a nice thing to add to our BGP support. And this is a bug, I think. Yeah, this is a bug, not a let me uh, that's not a user request really. I mean that's not a new feature request. To those issues, I'd like to add one use case. Unfortunately, I don't think they've opened a GitHub issue yet. It's something I've discussed with Chen before on Slack, and it seems that two users so far have expressed interest in being able to um, load balance egress traffic for a given namespace. So for example, for one namespace, they want to be able to define like one egress policy, but they want the egress traffic for that namespace to be load balanced across multiple egress IPs. Um, and preferably those egress IPs, not necessarily, but preferably, I want to say, can be assigned to different egress nodes. Sorry. Because if you have like a namespace with a lot of workloads and a lot of egress traffic, this is a way to kind of like load balance that traffic across different egress nodes to avoid running into bottlenecking issues. Um, so I think this is also a reasonable feature request. I'll follow up with them tomorrow and see if they can open a GitHub issue. If they cannot do it directly, then maybe I can create the issue myself. But yeah, two separate users so far have mentioned this. I don't know if there are a lot of different ways to do that. I know that Chen suggested modifying the egress API so that it supports like a list of egress IPs.
Yeah, perhaps the first the last issue in this page is also related that user want to see that they have applied a multiple egress to same pod and they want the pod to use the closest egress IP. I think they can be supported in a unified way that if you apply multiple egress to a group of ports, then and in the data path, we will use the we will use the closest egress IP. For example, if the egress node, the node the port runs on already has one egress IP, it should never leave the egress traffic should go out the cluster via this node directly instead of redirecting it to another node. I think that's something similar. However, for this user request, this kind of user request, the biggest challenge might be how we support affinity and load balancing, because the egress, the group of workloads could change, and yeah, if we want to load balance, well, if we want to load balance the egress traffic, then we will have to break some existing connections. Otherwise, yeah, it might be not possible to achieve what user really want. Yeah. That's the biggest challenge, I think, so far. From API perspective, it should be fine. Maybe we could check how this is typically handled in other softwares.
Thanks, Chen. And do you still think that the solution where one egress can have multiple IPs is better than having multiple egresses assigned to the workload, it's each with its own IP?
Um, I I think from both user perspective and from implementation perspective, a single egress should be easier. Otherwise, you know, especially for the load balancing part, it would be rather complex to do load balance between multiple egresses when each of them select some workloads. We need to handle all egress together to see how uh, to see how to balance the traffic. And from user perspective, I feel multiple egress applying to the same port might be harder to understand how the configuration is will really take effect. With a single egress, they can see all the IPs that can be potentially used. For example, if I want to check which how my port will apply egress policy, I could just take a look at a single egress that selects this port. If we do another way, I think it might be difficult to first check the port selectors, whether the port selectors has selected this port, and they will have to try to list such egress first, then to understand which one it might use, right? So from API perspective, I think a single might be simpler for both users and the code. But from implementation perspective, yeah, I think we will need to think about how we handle the events of pod joined and lived, and when the egress IP is appended and deleted, would that be acceptable to users that we break some connections sometimes when the traffic load has to be rebalanced, or we do some kind of affinity that until we will only load balance the traffic when the connection has terminated, And for next connection, we will use the algorithm to select a new egress IP. Only in that case, but it may have higher requirement in the implementation.
I see the problem is on the source node, right? We have to keep tunneling the packets to no.
Yeah, it
What,
would be
so,
per connection, right? So for this port, if it has already established some connection with external IPs, if we don't break connections, they will, for some source port, they will have to use one egress IP. But for some new connections, they will have to use another.
yeah, I see. So we would need to learn some flows on the source node to keep track of which egress IP was used for each connection.
Right, that's a difficult part. Yeah, I guess we need to think about this more if we support it.
Yep, that seems like a bigger one than the other issues.
I also I just labeled another issue. You have refreshed it. It's the fourth one, the English, yeah, related. I think this is also kind of user request about whether we support uh, uh, multiple languages. But we can also treat this as a bug, I think. The current problem is that for some users, if their Windows servers returns for some util scripts, if the script return text specific to one language, but our code doesn't handle it well, we match the text output instead of the status code. I'm not sure whether there is really a status code for this case we can use, but at least this has caused the problem that matching the text code got a unexpected behavior that the code thought the driver was not installed while it was. So yeah, I think Wei and Shuyan has had the question that whether we should support different language, and their concern is there might be some the effort to support multiple language might be big. Yeah. My initial thought is that supporting multiple language might be basic, and people may not expect that a software will not work when the environment has preferred one language. So and I think normally this kind of problem should be fixed by not relying on the text output, which is supposed to be human readable. Instead, we should rely on the status code. I know Linux commands support this very well, but I'm not sure the case of Windows, for example.
I want to make some comments here. Actually, we cannot use status code for this utility because in our case, we need to use output string. And unfortunately, the PNP utils which was provided by the Windows, it doesn't provide structurized uh, outputs. So for our case, we have to translate the output string into objects. Then we can use the object fields and filters to pass to check whether or not OSXT driver is installed on the Windows host. But for PNP utils, I mean the utilities we are using, it can be suitable for multiple languages according to the locale settings. But for our case, Yeah, yes, we only use the English as the keyword to pass or to translate the output string. That is the root cause for the issue. So we cannot use status code. But how to if we finally choose to still rely on the PNP utils to check the OS X driver's installation status, maybe we need to think about either translate the keywords of the output to different languages, or we need to search for other solutions like the registry to record the status whether we already installed SXT driver. That's my thought.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. So you mean there is no other commands other than enum drivers? It doesn't have something like a get driver to return whether a driver exists or not.
At least by now, I didn't find a valid Windows native command to provide such usage. And also, actually, for the reporter, he has suggested some commands, and he expects to be used as alternative. But after my try, the tool doesn't work for us. So maybe we need some more thoughts about the resolution.
Okay.
Yeah, and it seems the output is not always formatted exactly the same because this first entry here has one extra row compared to this one. So it's we can't even rely, I guess, on the on like a fixed number of rows for each driver. Even though the order seems to be the same, it seems that sometimes we have like an extra row. And I guess we don't have this problem in the main installation method, right? Just to point it out, because when I assume that when we run this from a container, like we do in the recommended installation method, we run this script from a container. I assume that in this case, the language used inside the container is always English, and that the script will work no matter what the main language is for the underlying server. So I assume this is only when a user invokes this script directly on the Windows Server machine.
Does Windows support that setting environment language like a Linux environment variable before calling the script, before calling the utility? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I checked and it seemed possible to do that in a PowerShell session, but I think there was a lot of caveats. Like the language must be enabled in the OS because you must have like the language files installed or something. And there were a few other caveats. It doesn't always work and for all programs and things like this. So I don't think there is a reliable way to do it.
I see.
Okay, so I guess let's look and see if we can do anything there. I agree that it would be good to have a script that works independently of the um, default localization, default language. I think this is all the issues we had in this list. Is there any other issue you guys want to discuss or any other topic you guys want to discuss? All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing. I think this is all for today then. Um, Congratulations again on the recent release. I think the BGP support was a great milestone, and hopefully we get a lot of user feedback on it. So thanks everyone. Have a good night or have a good day, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, bye, bye.